For weeks, Daisy the elephant refused to eat and cried daily at the zoo. Her caretakers were baffled, unable to understand the sudden shift in her behavior. Then, a familiar figure was brought back to the zoo, and his arrival changed everything. What can we do to help her? This question haunted the zookeepers every day for the past month. Daisy, once full of life, now barely reacted to her surroundings. It was as if she had given up. To the zoo staff, Daisy wasn't just an elephant. She was family. She had been at the wildlife park since she was a calf, growing up under their care. Over the years, she had become their pride and joy, known for her playful personality and occasional pranks to keep the staff's attention. Elephants are intelligent and deeply emotional creatures, and Daisy had once been a perfect example of that. Seeing her now, withdrawn and unresponsive, was heartbreaking. Most days, she refused to eat or drink, taking only a few bites after relentless coaxing. This was completely unlike the elephant who used to devour her meals eagerly. Even more troubling was the sorrowful expression in her eyes, an unmistakable look of grief and loss. Some zookeepers had even caught her shedding tears at unexpected moments. They needed to act fast. If she fell into a deep depression, she might retreat entirely and refuse to eat, which could eventually lead to her death. The zookeepers had exhausted all their ideas. In desperation, the park manager reached out to an old friend, Mike, a wildlife specialist with extensive experience caring for elephants. 2 days later, Mike arrived at the zoo, but by then, Daisy's condition had not improved. She remained motionless in her enclosure, as if the world around her didn't exist. "Daisy? It's me," Mike called softly, taking cautious steps toward her. "Why are you giving them such a hard time?" At the sound of his voice, Daisy's ears twitched. Her head slowly turned toward him. She was frail from weeks of neglecting food, but with surprising determination. She pushed herself up and walked toward him. This was the moment she had been waiting for. As Mike watched her approach, memories flooded back. Memories of the first time he had met Daisy. She was only a year old when she was brought to the wildlife park. Orphaned after poachers killed her mother, the trauma had left her deeply distrustful of humans, and for a long time, she avoided any attempt at bonding. Just as Daisy was adjusting to her new home, the park brought in a new volunteer, 24-year-old Mike. Though he was only a volunteer at the time, Mike was determined to prove himself. He had always dreamed of working with animals, particularly in wildlife conservation. This was more than a job to him. It was a calling. When he joined the team, he was assigned to assist with Daisy. The caretakers explained how hard it had been to earn her trust, but nothing could have prepared him for just how challenging it would be. Daisy barely responded to anyone except her main caretaker. She avoided human touch, associating people with the loss of her mother. Whenever someone tried to interact with her, she withdrew, acting as though they didn't exist. Mike, too, was met with the same resistance. Every day, he tried to approach her, and every day, she turned away. It was clear. Her wounds ran deep. Daisy had been deeply scarred by the loss of her mother. In his free time, Mike pored over books and sought advice from wildlife experts he had met before arriving at the park. While he knew he couldn't force Daisy to accept him, he realized that he had to show her day after day just how much he cared. 1 month after his introduction to Daisy, Mike and the caretaker arrived at the elephant enclosure with her meal. She ate quietly, then, as usual, lay down, waiting for them to leave. But this time, Mike asked to stay behind. It was his last task of the day, and he wanted to spend a few extra minutes with her before heading home. Given permission, he settled onto a nearby log. Like humans, elephants are empathetic creatures, capable of interpreting emotions through voice and body language. Mike hoped to use this natural ability to connect with Daisy, to gently break down the walls she had built around herself. He began talking. At first, it was about simple things. His day, funny incidents with the other animals, and small observations about the park. There was no structure to his words. He just spoke about whatever came to mind. He noticed Daisy's ears twitch slightly when he laughed, but apart from that, she showed no clear sign that she was listening. After about 30 minutes, he said his goodbyes and left for the day. But this was only the beginning. Every evening, after finishing his work, Mike returned to Daisy's enclosure to spend time with her. He took on the task of bathing her, turning it into a special ritual where they could bond and build trust. Days turned into weeks, and soon, Mike began to see the results of his patience and dedication. Quick pause. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support means the world to us. Thank you. Over time, Daisy began to anticipate Mike's visits. Her ears perked up whenever she heard his voice, and she watched him with growing curiosity. Bath time became her favorite part of the day, the one moment when she was most cooperative with her caretakers. Then, one evening, something remarkable happened. Mike was exhausted. It had been a long day, and all he wanted was to go home. But he and Daisy had built a routine, and he had no intention of breaking it. He planned to stay for just a few minutes, long enough to greet her and apologize for cutting the visit short. But when he arrived at her enclosure, he stopped in his tracks. For the first time, Daisy was already on her feet, waiting for him. As he stepped inside and sat down, she approached him cautiously. Mike spoke as usual, sharing stories about his day, but this time, something was different. She was listening. Really listening. The moment he prepared to leave, Daisy reached out, gently wrapping her trunk around his arm and giving a soft tug. Mike froze, looking down at her in shock. A wide smile spread across his face. Nearly 3 months had passed since he first met Daisy, and this was the first time she had voluntarily reached out to touch someone. Mike felt humbled and honored. He knelt down and gently petted her, expecting her to retreat. But this time, she didn't pull away. Instead, she held onto his hand, as if reassuring herself that he wasn't leaving her. When Mike told the park manager and his supervisor what had happened, no one believed him, until they saw it with their own eyes. The moment he called her name, Daisy darted toward him. When he bent down, she nuzzled against him, expressing a joy and affection she hadn't shown in a long time. Seeing this extraordinary bond, the park made an official decision. Mike would become Daisy's primary caretaker, with a team of assistants to help him. Under Mike's care, Daisy blossomed. She became more cheerful and no longer shied away when other staff members approached her. She even began playing with them, often using her trunk to gently block their path, making them laugh. But no matter how friendly she became, she never formed the same deep connection with anyone else. To Daisy, Mike was more than just a caretaker. He was her first friend, the one who had saved her when she was slipping into solitude. Their time together at the end of each day was something she cherished, and so did he. As word of Mike's extraordinary ability to bond with animals spread, wildlife parks and sanctuaries from around the world began reaching out to him for advice. Though overwhelmed by the attention, he was grateful. He began offering consultations and training programs, sharing his techniques for earning the trust of rescued animals. But no matter how busy he became, he never let it take him away from Daisy. He remained her caretaker, her friend, and her family. Over the years, their bond only grew stronger. 30 years passed. Daisy was now 31 years old, a beloved symbol of the park. Her playful nature and affection for visitors made her the heart of the wildlife park. People no longer remembered the frightened, withdrawn calf she once was. And Mike, he was now 53. But to Daisy, he would always be the young man who once sat on a log and spoke to her like she mattered. The man who never gave up on her. The friend who had changed her life. Mike had achieved more than he ever expected, becoming a key figure in wildlife preservation projects. While he loved his work at the park, he felt it was time for a new chapter, one where he could travel abroad and contribute to wildlife protection on a global scale. Though his bond with Daisy remained unshakable, he believed that his assistant was ready to continue his work with her. As he prepared to leave, Mike gradually reduced the time he spent with Daisy, hoping it would help her adjust to his absence. The park was reluctant to see him go and tried to convince him to stay. But a month later, his resignation was officially accepted. On his last day, Mike stepped into the enclosure one final time to say goodbye. Daisy, thrilled to see him, seemed more interested in playing than in listening to his words. Unable to hold her focus, Mike gave in, laughing as he joined in her playful antics, savoring the moment. But when it was time to leave, he turned quietly, hoping she wouldn't realize he was gone. He was wrong. As he stepped away, Daisy suddenly wrapped her trunk around him, refusing to let go. Mike's heart sank. He had spent years understanding her emotions, but in this moment, he had failed to anticipate how deeply she would feel his absence. Losing familiar caretakers can cause elephants to fall into depression, even refusing to eat. Their incredible memory makes it nearly impossible to forget someone who has cared for them. Seeing the distress in Daisy's eyes, Mike realized he couldn't leave her like this. Laughter erupted from the staff as Daisy, still wrapped around him, refused to let him move too far. Mike smiled, understanding that he had to stay a little longer, not just for her sake, but for his own. He took charge of feeding her and, for old time's sake, offered to bathe her. Daisy, overjoyed, playfully sprayed water from her trunk, sending Mike running in mock retreat, laughing all the way. For the rest of the day, he remained by her side, making sure she was okay before finally returning home. Seeing his unwavering dedication, the park made him an offer, one they hoped he wouldn't refuse. They asked him to stay as park manager, a position that would grant him flexible hours while keeping him close to Daisy and the other animals he had bonded with. Mike accepted. Though he was no longer Daisy's primary caretaker and didn't see her every day, he made sure to visit whenever he could. Time passed, and one day, something incredible happened. Daisy welcomed a calf of her own, and the very first thing she did? She introduced her baby to Mike. It was clear she wasn't just showing off. She wanted her calf to bond with the same person who had meant so much to her. To Mike, it was one of the greatest honors of his life. No matter where life took him, Daisy would never forget the kindness, patience, and love he had shown her when she needed it most. She knew, without a doubt, that she had found a friend for life. Did you enjoy the story? If you were in Mike's shoes, would you have given up traveling the world to stay with Daisy? Let us know in the comments below. If you liked the story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and leave a like. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you in the next video. Have a wonderful day.